Welcome back, my friends. Thanks again for joining us for another episode as we continue studying through the Word of God together. If you've been following along with this live, it's been a little over a week since we've done this. It took some time off for Christmas, and we're jumping back in, but hope to jump back in and kind of keep at this consistently. And so we are in the book of Daniel, and we're kind of in the third section as we kind of finish up chapter 2. We've been walking through chapter 2 in this great opportunity that Daniel's been given, and an opportunity to interpret a dream for the king. In this situation, he really, he's part of the wise men, but wasn't overly well known. And then they find themselves in a situation where the wise men that were well known were unable to give the king what he wanted. So the king wanted more than just interpretation of the dream. He was so afraid of this dream that he wanted them to tell him what the dream was and then interpret, which they all said no man can do. And so what ends up happening is they're about to destroy all the wise men. And Daniel comes through and says, wait a minute, let me work on this. And we talked about the idea that he and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego spent time in prayer and getting prepared for this, asking God, because God's the only one that could give the vision of the dream. So here's what we pick up with, as they've done taking time in prayer, they spent time in the presence of God, and now they're going to come to the king and give an answer. And so we see this right at the end, really the last. It's a longer section than normal, but at the end of, really middle to the end of chapter 2, verse 24, Daniel 2:24, he says this, "Therefore Daniel went into Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, 'Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation.' Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus to him, 'I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation.' The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, 'Are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation?' So what we see is obviously pretty straightforward. He goes to the one that was supposed to destroy him, and he says, 'Give me a chance. I can do this, or at least God can do this. Give me a chance to go before the king.' And now the king, he's in front of him, and he asks a question. The key I wanted to focus on is I love Daniel's answer. After all that time spent with God and the fact that he's about verbally to give an answer to the king, I love his answer right here. Verse 27, Daniel answered the king and said, 'No wise men, enchanters, magicians, astrologers can show to the king the mystery of the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in latter days. Your dream and the visions of your heads as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed, came the thoughts of what would be after this. And he who reveals mysteries made known to you what it is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind." I love the fact that in long detail he gives the fact that it's not me. He goes, "You've been given this by God for the future of the kingdoms, and God has revealed it to me so that I can show it to you." I love the fact that he said, "There's no way, there's no human that can do this. What's about to happen is from God." And I love the fact that in spite, he's living in exile, he's living away from home, he's been brought into slavery because of war, and you could look back and say, God allowed all this to happen, and you can show frustration. All of that you can vocalize as true. But the fact is, Daniel looked at it as, this is where God has me, and it's my job to honor God in this. So he stands in front of him, and and this is why I believe God was willing to use Daniel and keep him in that position, because Daniel was constantly, much like Joseph in front of Pharaoh, Daniel was constantly stating, no, God is the one that gave. God is the one that does. It's constantly pointing it back to God. So let's first look at what the dream. He gives the dream in verse 31. He says, "You say, O king, and behold a great image, or you saw, O king, and behold a great image. This image mighty of exceeding brightness stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest was of arms and of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, and the bronze, the silver, and the gold, all together were broken in pieces, and came like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. And so he gives this dream, and many of us are familiar. It's a very prophetic dream. Basically, it's a picture of a large statue, and the head of gold, and every time you go down, there's different colors, and obviously it's more than different colors. It's different types of metal, different types of materials that were used to make. And as you notice, if you just pay attention, the lower they go, the weaker the materials are used. You go from this amazing head of gold and it goes down to clay, and you realize it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. But now I love this. He takes some time to go in and give the interpretation of the dream. So now we jump into verse 36. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the king of kings, to whom God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power and the might and the glory. Notice in verse 36, he starts talking about the greatness of King Nebuchadnezzar, which will be the head, we'll see in a moment, but he talks about the fact that God has placed him there. This pagan king had been placed by not just the God of Israel, which he was, but by God in general, the God of all creation. So he starts reminding him, listen, your position you are in was not by you. God has placed you here. Verse 38, he goes, and in whose hand has been given wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, the birds of the heaven, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Another kingdom inferior to you shall rise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things, and like iron that crushes shall break and crush all these. And as you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay, and the partly of iron, it shall be divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with clay, soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. And as you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, and they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings, God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all the kingdoms and bring them to the end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw the stone that was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, a great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and the interpretation is sure. So simply, he talks about some coming Gentile nations that are going to follow. The first one is obviously King Nebuchadnezzar, who he had been placed. He was really the king of all kings. He was the greatest of the nation at that time. Now, if you know not too much later, there'll be a time when the Medes and Persians will come in. And frankly, the story, if I remember correctly, comes that Daniel reads the writing on the wall. And when he reads the writing on the wall, he talks about the kingdom will be lost. And then when it's lost, the Medes and Persians are going to come in, and it gets destroyed. We later hear about the Persian king. And they were a great nation. You know this a little bit in the aspect of the time of Esther and things like that. You've got this Persian king. Later comes in is another Gentile. We would know him as Alexander the Great. He will come in and destroy them. Later on from them will become the Roman Empire. Now, Roman Empire ultimately does not get destroyed from outside war. It really gets destroyed from the inside. Immorality and all the things in it, it just ends up crumbling. But you know, when Jesus was born, he was born under the great time of the Roman Empire. Ultimately, there is a stone, this interpretation says, that's going to be God. He's going to destroy all kingdoms, no matter what's going to happen. And he's going to set up a earthly kingdom. He's going to set up what we know as the millennial kingdom. Ultimately, his kingdom will reign forever, not just 1,000 years, but forever. And that's the stone that comes down that ultimately becomes the mountain. And so what he's doing is he's giving him a list of all these prophecies. Now, up to the Roman Empire being there and destroyed, they were the last great empire, if you want to say it. We look more in democracies today. This last empire is still something we're waiting for. God, or Jesus, to sit on the throne of David and to rule and reign. This final kingdom is still yet to come. So 3 of these kingdoms have come through. We're still waiting for the 4th kingdom. So let's see what happens. In verse 46, it says, Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell down upon his face and paid homage to Daniel and commanded that an offering and incense be offered to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, "Truly your God is a God of gods, and the Lord of lords, a revealer of mysteries, and you have been able to reveal this mystery." Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel remained at the king's court. Really, what you end up seeing at the end is you see that Daniel was given a great amount of power, a great amount of position, he and his three friends. And you can go back to the beginning of Daniel's willingness to stand and not eat of the food and stand on what God had asked him to do. And now, a couple years later, you see him in the situation where that was being honored by God. God had given him the ability to be able to interpret the dreams. And because of that, now he's in a great position of authority, which we know later comes back to cause grief in verse chapter 6 in a little bit. When he gets thrown in the lion's den, he just gets to be more and more hated by those around him. But really what we see here is, one, we see the prophecy. Most of us were familiar with it. This is stuff that's just really history. To them, it was future. To us, it's history, except for one, that's because Jesus. We kind of sit in the middle of this time where we are waiting for this kingdom to come. That is when Jesus will actually physically step foot back on earth in the future, we believe, at the time of the millennial reign. That's all still to come. But one of the principles we can pull, applications we can pull from this, is we see the fact that Daniel and their willingness, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the willingness to stand strong, which they will be asked to do at least one more time apiece in the future. When you look at this, you see men that are willing to do this, and God honored them in a place where they were least likely to hold any level of position. Now they do. And God has used them. God has given them a tool. They use their tool and honor God with it. And now God is blessing them because of it. And I hope we understand that. What we've been given, we must remember it came from God. We must honor God with it, use it for God. And then God, I believe, will continue to bless that gift he's given to us. Well, we greatly appreciate the time you've given to us today. Hope this is an encouragement. Hope it will give you a little bit of information and understanding of what's happening in this. And especially in the second half of Daniel, there'll be a lot more about prophecy we'll dig into, find out what it means and what does that mean for us today. We greatly appreciate the time you've given us today. We hope you join us again next time.